Hello.
Hey Adriano, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Glad you can make it.
Yeah. It was not a problem with myself. So I'm pretty much on. I work on, but for myself, I'm a full-time investor now. This year, I was a software engineer, and I quit, and I'm just working on with investments, just managing my own wealth, not anyone.
Nice. Congrats. So very flexible. Do you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, my I'm trying. I'm doing a setup here. I'm trying to use my blue microphone. Can you hear me? Okay.
I hear you good.
Great.
All right, welcome everyone. Alpha King. Makesi, I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Yeah, makesy. So like making stuff.
Ah, nice. Makesy, your builder.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it, love it, love it. Cool. All right. It usually takes a couple minutes for people to come pouring in. Um, so yeah, we'll just have a bit of banter, uh, do some general introductions. Um, what else? Introduce the topic, um, while other people will be coming in. Um, Alpha, you're present as well.
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, my name is Daniel Simon, off-chain London founder, and very excited. Thanks for the invitation and excited to be here and excited to grill Gary. I mean, everyone loves Gary Gensler, isn't it?
I think we all had a good time yesterday, and it's interesting how Gary Gensler is probably crypto's most hated figure by everyone, like universally.
Now, except Bitcoin maxis, they love him. It's true though. It is true though. Are there any Bitcoin maxes here? They probably might come here to cheer for protect someone on Gary's side. The regulators are here for the protection of the public interest.
This is a joke, man. Yeah.
All right, awesome. I'll okay, I'll get this. I'll get the ball rolling. So that means welcome to the audience. I'm sure more people will show up as we continue the space. That's usually how it goes. If you have any questions uh, already, like drop them in the comments. Like the earlier you drop them, the more likely we'll get around to them. Also, maybe drop some fire emojis if you enjoyed last week's grilling and you like today's grilling as well. So yeah, quick recap of events last week, congressional hearing with Gary Gensler on a lot of topics, but one of them on crypto. He was, I want to say, interviewed, but really grilled by a number of people, most from the Republican Party, if not all. I'm not sure. The clip most people will have seen was where Gary Gensler was asked, is Ethereum a security or a commodity? And he cannot give a straight answer. And he's actually absolutely treated like a schoolboy. A lot of people enjoyed those. But I think the general takeaway, let's say, from the different people uh, questioning Gary was their concern was mostly a threat to the dominance of US capital markets by the behavior of him and the agency as it is currently under his leadership. And one person even called for his removal. This all has to do with recent, you could even say, like, you could definitely call it a crypto crackdown from the SEC recently. So Kraken was fined with a $30 million fine. They had to halt staking in the US. Bitrex is charged for operating illegally, and Coinbase is very uneasy. Obviously, this is very relevant because the hearing might give us potential signals about coming policy on our industry in our, well, a leading nation for our industry, definitely. So we're gonna get into this. The first thing I'll ask is people's impressions, like first impressions on last week's videos. They've seen anything that they've taken note of. But before we do that, I want to ask the speakers to first introduce themselves, and I would say give a little bit of a general background, but also how your background links to today's topic. Anyone, feel free to take it away.
Sure, I can start. As I mentioned before, my name is Adriano Feria, and I have a background in economics and computer science, and I've been a technology investor for just about 15 years now, and finally went full-time on investing this year, so I'm no longer a software engineer, just strictly an investor, and a big Ethereum enthusiast and metaverse as well, so in the background in economics and computer science is just perfectly matched for crypto. So that helps me a lot in being able to do research and come up with analysis. And I could almost say I'm an Ethereum maximalist. I'm not quite there, but I'm close to being one.
Cool. I can go next. Yeah. So. I have an academic background in econ and econ history, so that's kind of like where my interest in the regulatory environment comes from. But professionally, I've been like a data engineer, software engineer, and I started out in Web 2. And, I just am not a fan of the whole data custodian monopolist, big tech like business model that kind of dominates the production of software and the use of software in Web 2. And we've just seen like these huge network effects where, people are giving away data for free to these custodians, and then it can be used against them in a lot of ways. So, I mean, if people thought ads were bad, think about, AI displacing labor, instead of just selling people things, for slightly more than they would pay otherwise, or, have them buy more than they would otherwise, like also just using the user generated content to, essentially vaporize, their expected earnings. I mean, that sort of innovation is, it happens, and people have to find new types of work, but that just does not seem sustainable to me, that, we'll have these like points of centralization. So Web3 to me seemed like to be a solution to that type of business model, in that it distributes ownership of data and code to users, to end users. And so my purpose of going into Web3 was actually like, more because it was aligned with my values than anything else. So, my reaction to the stuff that's been going on with regulation and stuff, like the fact that Web3 is being cast as kind of like, immoral, whereas like Web 2 type practices, continue to avoid scrutiny. It's just like kind of outrageous to me. So I definitely see the problems in our space, and like we need to work to fix those. But the fact that people don't see the value of the underlying technology to solve a lot of social problems is, it just really bothers me. So I've been getting more and more involved in the, regulatory policy side of stuff. So it's just a personal interest for me.
Very interesting. You make a couple great points. And I think also ones that resonate with a lot of our audience. MetricsDAO, obviously, we're all about Web3 data, and that you're right. It also comes with certain takes on, open source data. It's also about ideals a little bit for a lot of people. Daniel, over to you.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with all of this. So myself, I'm coming from the marketing side of things, marketing and branding and community, as a community builder, community building, organizing big communities like worldwide, and also lobbying with the FCA and with the government of the UK. And we off-chain, we do lobbying in Lisbon and Washington, DC. But it looks like our lobbying needs to be a lot better, because we are doing pretty badly, guys. Because as you can see, Gary's showed us the middle finger, really. So we are screwed in a way, but because it's without him, he needs to be removed, really, because otherwise it's not going to change anything, and he will not be removed under this government. I believe nothing will happen. So basically, I'm coming from this lobby side of things, because I'm a crypto maxi, or you can even say I'm a shitcoin maxi, because I love all kind of altcoins. So because the money is there, and I'm into many altcoins like Phantom and others, like many. So yeah, but I love Bitcoin as well, obviously. So I want mass adoption, basically, and in order to achieve mass adoption, we need like really proper regulation. But at the same time, just one more point. At the same time, what I can see that it is kind of sad that Gary attacks like loads of companies, but he attacked also some really scammy crypto operations. So that's really bad when you attack like Coinbase, and Coinbase is the most compliant company ever. And don't get me wrong, I don't like Coinbase. I mean, 2018, Coinbase was the king. Now I don't think now they are king anymore. But what SEC is doing with Coinbase, that made me like sympathetic towards Coinbase. Now I feel like sorry for Brian, and now I like Coinbase. Yeah, I didn't like Coinbase nowadays, but because of the SEC, now they are the hero, really. So it actually helps Coinbase, this whole show. But basically, what I try to say that because of SEC, because of their position, now this makes weak SEC, and now when SEC attacks some scam or like some fraudulent crypto companies, that makes them like in a worse position than they should be, because there are not many, but there are some active like scam operation or fraud, and many like NFT Ponzi, or lots of things going on we shouldn't be proud of, or like many dodgy things. So yeah, that's true, and we don't want that to happen, really. Yeah.
Yeah, you touch on a great point. I think a lot of people in crypto actually are, at least to some extent, open to regulation, exactly for this reason, because everybody in the space who has its heart in the right place and the right intentions wants to put an end to all the scammy stuff as well. And that's what the SEC should be doing. And instead, it's attacking like all these great, like you said, Coinbase, most compliant crypto company ever, probably. It's attacking that, and therefore also losing credibility, which also makes it more difficult to actually handle the scam artists in the space, what they should be doing. So it totally relates to what you're saying. Thank you for your introduction. Very interesting to have somebody on board who's familiar with lobbying, so who knows how the political apparatus works, especially when it comes to regulation, etc. So very keen on getting your insights today. And with that, let's get the ball rolling. Let's get some first impressions. Like, what did you think? Yeah, last weekend you probably saw clips, you saw the news. Um, what were your thoughts, guys?
Well, first of all, this is not the first time that Gary has spoken publicly on this type of environment. He has done Senate hearings before, but those were very different in the vibe and nature because Senator Elizabeth Warren had discussed the that would be asked and orchestrated not just the questions but the answers as well, partially with Gary in secrecy before the hearings, and that information was leaked. I can't remember what triggered that information to come out publicly, but it's now known that under previous hearings with the Senate, Gary and Elizabeth Warren had collaborated to prep up the political theater of the hearing itself, the content of the hearing. So that looked very different from this hearing because now he was actually being asked the hard questions and he was fumbling. He couldn't really give a cohesive, congruent answer on many occasions, and he was even shaking. Some people point out he was visibly shaking at some points. So clearly there's something that it's very fishy about all this behavior, but the attitude and the lack of ability to give a straight answer of whether or not Ethereum is a security speaks for itself, considering that it's been around for many years. I think when was it, 2015 that it launched? And it's the second largest cryptocurrency in the world. It's pretty much in every single exchange. Every crypto exchange operates with Ethereum, except for a very small minority of Bitcoin Maxi exchange like Swan. So it's a fair question, and also he completely ignores the fact that these questions need to be asked because the asset class is new and it's very nuanced, right? So yeah, he can test and say how that has been around for a long time, say how the SEC, but in the context of and considering the nuance of this new asset class, the determination of whether or not these assets classify as a security need to be, there's some subjectivity to it, right? So it doesn't matter that the rules are clear if your interpretation of what the asset itself is, it diverges depending on the opinion. So on one side, you could say that, making Gary's case here that Ethereum is a security, that how Ethereum launched, it does qualify. It sounds like it qualifies as a security. But the fact is that it launched through a company in Switzerland outside of the United States. And since it launched, the network has changed and the dynamics of the network has changed. And you have to question also, what exactly are you buying when you hold Ethereum? Are you buying a piece of technology? Are you buying the tech stack? Are you buying something that is related to a company, or are you buying something that the value comes from a network that is not actually owned by any particular entity, but is just a decentralized network? And in case of Ethereum specifically, and you could make the argument also for almost any networks, that when you buy, the expectation of profit and also the use cases that you have for the asset that you're buying are based not just on the technology itself, but largely the value comes from the actual network. So the tech stack is just a component of it. And to illustrate that problem, and you can look at the history of forks that these networks have had, meaning the code was completely copied and redeployed, and the forks are worthless because people are not buying the tech per se, they're buying the network. And the network is not something that is provided by the people that develop the technology. The network is something that all users participate. So just alone in that sense, that level of nuance being completely ignored shows either a lack of understanding of or ill intent on behalf. And one thing also that people don't know about Gary Gensler is that he has worked the background that he came from Goldman Sachs originally. He had a career at Goldman Sachs. For almost 20 years, he worked at Goldman Sachs. So he has definitely a background that goes back to TradFi, and one of the most unscrupulous financial institutions, which is Goldman Sachs, that has a horrible history of screwing with their customers and doing things, with the intent of not taking really care of the interests of their customers. And he came from that space. He had a career in that space, and now he's regulating the space. So you have to question, what are the strings attached? What's the intent behind his behavior and the way that he is putting forth his ideas, and what going forward, what the way that the U.S. should regulate the industry. So there's that element that people should be aware that he comes from that space. So he has kind of a dirty background on that end, and it does raise some red flags off the bat. But the fact that he is unable to address the nuances of the space is just even more concerning. And I wish the congressional hearing, they had touched on that and they say, hey, like, we understand, yes, the rules are clear, but this is a new asset class. There are nuances. We want to know your determination about such nuances to know if it classifies as a security or not. And then if he gives a straight answer, then he can open up the door for rebuttal. So maybe, and a lot of people are arguing that this lack of clarity is intentional to prevent the openness for a rebuttal, because then if he says, yes, is it a security because, and explains the reasoning why behind is a security, then the counter argument, the people that have an opposing view can create now an argument to rebut that. And you can't do that unless he says that openly, which he hasn't. But he did say, though, he was asked about Bitcoin in that hearing, and he did something that was really interesting, because he said, I haven't spoken about Bitcoin. He said that during the hearing, even though he has, but he said, I haven't spoken about Bitcoin, whether or not it's security, but the previous head of the SEC has, and he made that determination that it's not a security. He said that about Bitcoin. Well, the interesting thing is that in terms of Ethereum, well, he refuses to answer about Ethereum, but interestingly, the previous SEC had also made a public statement saying that Ethereum is not a security. So by that standard, if he's using the previous SEC head as the standard of defining, and if he's giving him credibility for making that assessment, then by that standard, Ethereum is not a security. And he should have also been pointed out to that Ethereum is not.
Oh,
but
sorry to interrupt, guys. So what was 10 years ago, I think 10 years ago or something like that, on the MIT, he gave this speech when Gary was talking about Ethereum. It's a commodity, it's not a security. So Gary, before, he already stated Ethereum is not a security. It's like, if the weather is good, sunny, then it's Ethereum is not a security. If the weather is bad, it's winter, then it's a security. Yeah, it's all about politics. It's a joke. It's about politics. Yeah. So basically, what my point is, what I try to make out of this, that I'm part of a group, like a VC group, VC and investment bankers, VCs, not less crypto nerds like me. It's more like VC and investment bankers. And when we're talking about Gary and the SEC, it's very interesting, because these people, the investment bankers, nice guys, smart guys, they actually defend Gary, they defend Gary Gensler. And you know why? Because the rule is, this is their interest, because they are the intermediaries, So the security means, they are the intermediaries required by the law. So that's their business. So they love securities, It's fantastic for them.
Well, that's a really good point. And, when Operation Choke Point, or like this crackdown on crypto is happening that people called Operation Choke Point was happening, my theory, my conspiracy theory about it that I really strongly believe is that they're not trying to kill crypto at all. It's just, it's gotten to a point where it's pretty obvious, self-evident that Bitcoin is going to be huge, Ethereum is going to be huge. And traditional financial institutions have completely missed out on that market. they have lost a market to Coinbase and others that it would be very hard to recapture because they are coming in behind and late, and all the volume, all the liquidity, and now the credibility is at Coinbase because they operate at an institutional level. So the crackdown, in my opinion, is really a way to make life very difficult for Coinbase and others, and to open that space back up to traditional financial investors, that financial companies that are prepping up to launch their own services for Bitcoin and Ethereum. So the lack of clarity is actually pretty convenient and fits right into this, because he can kind of leave that pending out there, and while making life difficult for this new financial companies, this fintech companies that have now a huge market, and it's just, look how much money they make. Just look at the valuation of Coinbase, right? So that's a market that potentially could be funneled back into traditional finance by regulatory oppression. And that's my opinion. That's what's happening. They want control. There are strings attached, and it's nice to have that clientele and all that money flowing back to traditional finance, because not only because of the strings attached with donations and lobbying that those companies have, but it's also something that there's some degree of, there's mutual control, right? So the politicians have, to a certain degree, more control and influence over these institutions, and in terms of maybe making some censorship or international policy as well. So it's just fits into their mode better. So my opinion is that what is happening right now is just a way for the clients and money to be funneled back into TradFi. It's probably what we're going to be seeing soon. And we already know that NASDAQ is going to be operating with Bitcoin and Ethereum. They have announced that in the next 2 or 3 months, they're going to be launching custodial and I guess trading services also for Bitcoin and Ethereum. What other companies do that? I think was JP Morgan has made some announcement over the past week as well. Fidelity offers that as well. So, but the thing is, it's hard for them to grab any portion of the market, because all the market is revolving around Coinbase in the US. Coinbase is giant, right? So if you want to really shift and tilt the board, well, you can do that through regulatory oppression, and then just let that money funnel back into TradFi that way. That's really what I think is going on. Yeah,
that's a very interesting take. I wonder if they do that, and it also sounds like that would be convenient for government, and talking about CBDCs, etc. Maxi, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that people have been pointing out, over the past week, is a lot of the contradictions between his statements, his more recent statements, and his statements, 1 or 2 years ago, or when he was teaching at MIT. And I think Bill Hughes from Consensus has the best take on this, but he went back to the lectures, and he was looking at, what Gensler said about, how public policy works. And Gensler is not a lawyer. He is, an investment banker turned into, a politician that poses as a regulator. And what he said in some of his lectures were that, first you start off with the messaging. So the narrative's the most important part of any sort of policy development. It's not that you start with the law, an analysis of the law, analysis of what the impact of the policy is going to be for social welfare or anything like that. It's what's the narrative, the message. And then you move to the politics. So you form the coalitions you need to get something passed. And then only after you have the messaging and the politics do you move to the analysis and the policy. So, the big thing for me is just that I see all these contradictions, and it's just kind of exemplary of the broader problems in Washington D.C. with partisanship. And basically it's just all about controlling the narrative now, and the narrative doesn't even matter. The content of what you're saying doesn't matter. It's just does it serve the objective that I'm pursuing? as far as policy at this time. And to me, it's like it's really harmful for the reputation and integrity of our regulatory institutions to see this kind of like unprincipled behavior, this waffling and like lack of systematic approach to regulation. And if you think of the U.S. markets, they talk about how you know how it's the one of the wonders of the world, and like the tried and true investor protections and all of this. And one of the things that made U.S. markets so attractive is the rule of law and the strong protection of property rights. And in many ways, I see us kind of moving away from that and kind of undermining our reputation. And that's also one of the theses behind Ethereum is a credibly neutral L1. That's also kind of like what the American legal system has been historically. And so the contradictions are troubling. The fact that it's become a partisan issue is troubling. And I just see this accelerating adoption elsewhere outside of the U.S. So it's just completely counter to national interest in many ways. So I see this as very short-sighted and very politically motivated, and just like not sort of the process that the U.S. has historically followed. So we're just seeing the executive branch get more and more politicized by political appointees, and becoming more and more attached to the political parties and their objectives, as opposed to the rule of law and these types of principles that make the market attractive. So I'm really really troubled by this stuff, and I don't see much hope, honestly, in the near term. I just think that material conditions are going to have to change. People are going to have to see it work elsewhere before they actually start to understand the problems with this approach. And it's just it could be too little, too late at that point. But yeah, basically, people are going to have to see it working in other jurisdictions before we reverse course on this.
You make an interesting point. What you touch on is that this is also stifling to innovation, which historically has been like one of the markers of US success, right? Globally, economically. Why this short-sightedness, do you think? And aren't we already seeing that adoption? Last week we had a crypto Twitter space on crypto as a way for financial inclusion, and it's seeing major adoption in a lot of African nations, where people have a real need for these types of services. Same as Latin America, where people are under authoritarian regimes, or where there's hyperinflation. Um, so I guess two questions, like why that short-sightedness, and aren't we already seeing a lot of adoption outside of the US that maybe is not in raw numbers that great yet, but it touches a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll start off and try to be quick, but I mean they're very domestically focused and oriented, so they don't. I just don't think that they care. That's not in their purview as like a law enforcement agency in the U.S. They're just focused on domestic benefits, and the fact is that U.S. does have very strong, financial system and things that kind of work, but it's just kind of a pastiche of things that have been built up over the years that sometimes fall apart, as we've seen with like banking crises and things like that. But basically, yeah, the benefits right now of like at least financial crypto are, more so in places that don't have that strong financial system and system of property rights, in that, the trustlessness is actually like a benefit. Whereas like for everyday Americans, that's just not as like big of an issue in their lives. So I think that's kind of like why we see, it's just basically blowback from SBF and just the fact that, most Americans aren't really getting like benefit or using this stuff every day. So it can be a punching bag. Whereas like with TikTok, you do see a ton of pushback from the left on stuff like the Restrict Act. So, it can be a punching bag because not enough people are like using it and getting value out of it because it's kind of in a nascent state. So that's kind of the reason I see for that.
Very interesting. Okay, so U.S. is mostly domestically focused, and basically a lot of the benefits that that derive from crypto are not really felt in the U.S. but more so abroad. Adriano had his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'd go back. Always like when there's something happening in the political spectrum, you have to ask the question of whose interest is being served. And you have to think in terms of corporations and interest groups. And then you can make then the determination of, what this policy is doing, whose interest is being served. And you have to be cynical in that way. I think instead, I'm very cynical. So I don't see this as short-sightedness from the SEC. I'm thinking in terms of, okay, whose interest is being served and how is the interest of these people being served. So I go back to my thesis that this is actually in the interest of traditional finance, and we'll see the follow-up whether this thesis is true or not. We'll see in the follow-up. So if things start rolling out in traditional finance, and then as these services from the traditional finance start rolling out, and then we get some clarity that benefits the operation from the services from traditional finance as opposed to adoption and user base from Coinbase and other fintech companies, then that validates the thesis that this is not a just short-sightedness. It's a matter of like wanting to control who gets all the money that is flowing in the crypto industry, because there's a lot of money to be made and there's a lot of money being made. And it's just hard to regain that market. It's just something. It's like if you go back to how Microsoft completely missed the beat with the mobile space, right? And imagine if regulators found a way to just hurt Apple so badly that would slow down the adoption of the iPhone and give Microsoft a leg up. They would be maybe not have a monopoly, but they would actually have a presence in the space. And they could have done that, but it would look ridiculous because, those things are not as complex as financial instruments and nuanced as crypto is. So the advantage of interest groups is that crypto is something that is very little understood by the general population. It is nuanced by nature, and it's something that can be twisted and turned in terms of presenting a narrative, like you said, and because of that, it can shift the narrative to benefit the interest groups that are pulling the strings. Because the people on top, right, the people in this financial institutions, at this point they have a pretty good understanding of what crypto is and how it works and how it is beneficial and so on. So they know what's coming, and they want a piece of the pie, in my opinion. So that's one thing. But the other thing is you question about like, okay, how does that present a risk to the U.S. government, or the risk, kind of a systemic risk to the operation of these assets in terms of the government itself? And Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're still very much immature assets. They're almost, you could say, purely speculative still at this point. The price action that happens for these assets and the capital flows are almost still based on speculation. Bitcoin for sure, almost purely based on that, because there's no utility at all. There's nothing you can do with Bitcoin. There's no digital economy. Ethereum is a little bit different.
Yeah, don't go there.
Ethereum is different because there is a parallel economy. But the parallel economy that you have, this digital economy with NFTs and other things happening, is still very speculative in nature. But it is an economy, right, that is denominated in Ethereum and so on. And this actually, Ethereum is generating all the cash flow through transaction fees. But generally, it's still, I would say, a very much primarily speculative asset in nature. So those two things, they present absolutely no threat to the US dollar at all. Like the Bitcoinization, that maximalists claim, what the hyper Bitcoinization is just, in the short term, is just absolutely ridiculous. There's no threat at all to the US dollar. But in Ethereum, there is something that is threatening to the US dollar, and that's the combination of stable coins with private protocols. And it is actually the first thing that regulators cracked down was Tornado Cash, if you remember. And why did they crack down on Tornado Cash? Not because it's just a private protocol on Ethereum, but it's a private protocol that has access to US dollar stablecoins. And that is really, bad for the US because they completely lose control of it. So that's why they cracked down on it. So they're much more afraid of what Ethereum can do as a network and its capabilities than they are of Ethereum as an asset. So Ethereum as a network, it is really disruptive, much more than Bitcoin. And that's why the first thing that the regulators did when this whole crackdown started, it really started with Tornado Cash. You have to go back to Tornado Cash. And the reason why they went after Tornado Cash is because stablecoins exist. It's US dollar stablecoins exist, and then now they can have the US dollars transacted in a way that is permissionless and private, right? So it's not something that regulators like in any way. You can give credit to that. So that's why it's really important to separate, I think, stable coins that are pegged to fiat currency. That should be in a category on its own. And I think it's very fair to have very strict regulations around that because, after all, you're pegging to their asset, right? So U.S. government is in control of the dollar, the Federal Reserve is in control of the dollar, and you're pegging to that. So you have to respond to that. Now, in terms of Ether, it's its own thing. So you shouldn't have to respond on the same level of compliance as a stable coin.
Right. So I get what you're saying. You're saying that, at least Ethereum and in potential other crypto coins as well, form an alternative to at least a dollar, and with that, is a threat to, let's say, the powers that be, and therefore they're trying to slow that down so they can create another in for themselves, like a second chance.
but not to the dollar. It threats the actual financial system. So the financial system, the traditional financial system is controlled, right? And the dollar runs on this controlled financial system. But the moment this parallel financial system, the moment you have dollars there that are completely out of control, that's the part that today it is a threat to governments, and that's you're going to see a continuous crackdown on that.
I see what you're saying. The interesting thing to me is that kind of controversial. That implies that the SEC, a government agency, is in the pocket of the financial systems. I'm very interested in what Daniel would have to say about this, given, Daniel, your experience with lobbying and the political apparatus. Do you think that's something that is like, what do you make of that?
Sorry, which one?
Okay, so that the SEC in this case would be in the pocket of the financial system, and that basically they're directing them to slow down crypto in order for the financial system to get another in, to get a second chance at digital assets.
Yeah. Well, probably because JP Morgan, Blackstone, BlackRock, everyone wants this, and tokenization is a big thing. I just wanted to not contradict to Adriano, but a little bit like not fighting, because this is what I don't never liked, because we have Bitcoin maxi, we have ETH maxi, and it's never a good thing really. And I'm not an ETH bull for sure, but yeah, that was always dangerous for us when they are fighting amongst each other really, because we have to really be like united here, because see, I'm not like a ETH maxi, but I can see, I'm not an ETH fan really, but I can see the value in ETH, and I respect Vitalik. Yeah, Vitalik is the biggest, most influential crypto personality alive. I mean, we don't know where Satoshi's disappeared, or probably they killed, or we don't know. It's all kind of theory. But regardless of that, what is for sure that Vitalik is the most influential and the biggest crypto personality alive. And when we see Vitalik on a conference, I mean, each conferences, all kind of conferences is coming, I'm always actually amazed. This is off topic a bit. It's a bit off topic, but I'm almost amazed that when Vitalik is going alone without a bodyguard. Well, come on, Vitalik is one of the richest men, and he's got no bodyguard, nothing. I don't want to give any idea to any kidnapper, but yeah, I'm almost amazed actually about that. Imagine, this is crazy, yeah. But anyway, that's a different topic. But what I wanted to say that, yeah, I mean, USA is very, is not helping us. Is very against, cryptocurrencies in a way, and Russia is always love to do the opposite. So Russia is now very crypto friendly. Putin is we believe is one of the Bitcoin OG, probably is mining Bitcoin for many years already by now. So Russia is kind of like, it's pretty friendly, and we have Dubai, and even me, we are lobbying hard in London and then Washington DC, Lisbon, and our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Rishi loves CBDC. That's great. We love CBDC, fantastic. But then what's the business for us here? Because of course CBDC, that can give them like an unheard control which never existed before, like your worst nightmare. But where is the business here for us? I mean, we want then legalization of something, legalization of stable coins, legalization of some coins and so on. What was the business here in the CBDC? That's a crazy idea in itself. And like, what the hell they think, isn't it? What the hell they think? So basically, my point is that even me, I'm thinking to relocate myself to Dubai, not because I love Dubai so much, but actually it's a nice place. But human rights, blah blah blah, is maybe not the best for human rights activists, but it's a fantastically business-oriented place with a great value, no capital gains tax. So what not to like? Huh?
Where are you located, Alpha?
Right now, London, Westminster.
Oh, okay, thank you. I missed that. Yeah, and also like Russia, you say is crypto friendly, but from what I understand, the way they are friendly is not in the way that you want it to be, because they are friendly, but they only allow, from what I said, custodian wallets to exist. So they want control of it. They're not just saying crypto can operate here.
True. It was a bit tricky.
Yeah, so very different. Yeah.
Yep. Almost. I haven't seen a single government embrace permissionlessness, and So I don't know if anyone has seen that, but definitely have not seen any even the most permissive and friendly jurisdictions are all don't seem super warm about permissionlessness. But it kind of depends on the big point of difference, I think, is the extent to which they allow permissionlessness to exist and to run on permissionless systems. So the U.S. almost seems like just completely opposed to these systems existing and are trying to find ways to kill them. Whereas the EU with MiCA, they put in a lot of work to think about how traditional financial institutions could do what they do on these rails in a compliant way. So if you look at like the SocGen, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they're the newest stable coin, and it's like every issuance is like KYC'd and things like that, and it's very permissioned. And of course, USDC and USDT are permissioned in some ways too, in that they can block addresses and seize assets and so forth. But like the SocGen one is like permissioned, like you have to be added to the list to be able to like move it around and to have it issued and so forth. So I do see permissioning being kind of like this. Every government seems to want that, and what we might see is like there will be some like sanctioned and regulated assets, and there will be others that are regulated based on disclosure or so forth, but like maybe they can still be permissionless. But we don't see any movement on that, in the U.S. Whereas, like, I mean, a large European bank issuing a stable coin on Ethereum is a big deal, even if it like differs from existing stable coins in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way around for like stable coins to be permissionless. I think that's a pipe dream that stable coins can be permissionless, or algorithmic stable coins can exist without being regulatory compliant. I don't think that will be able to happen. But you can make the argument very easily that even the permissioned stable coins, they are a step up. They're an improvement over traditional finance system, because the difference between the two is the transparency, right? So you with USDC, if they are censoring users, if they are doing anything at all with the system, you can see everything. So there is transparency on that end, and that is a very important thing for the end user to know that such things are happening. And I think that alone is a step up from the obscure traditional finance system that you don't get to know what they're doing behind closed doors. They might be moving money, they might be censoring, but generally that information is private. And now that becomes public information. And if they're doing shenanigans that is suspicious, everyone is watching them. So, we get to watch them back. They're watching us, but we get to watch them back. And that asymmetry of transparency that exists in traditional finance system is one of the reasons why it is prone to having abuse problems. Now, in the stable coins running on the public blockchain, you have this mutual transparency where, they see everything we're doing, but we see everything they're doing too. So we can respond to any kind of abuse, and we can see that they're abusing it if they are.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to go back to the CBDC point, and it is interesting because there is this like coalition right now between the traditional financial institutions, which are intermediaries, and would be like central planners and people who favor retail CBDCs, which are completely disintermediating if retail customers have accounts at the Fed instead of bank deposits. So they are natural enemies, but right now they're kind of aligned with each other in many ways to suppress this the newcomers and like innovators, and it's just kind of a convenient alliance right now. But like for people who want retail CBDCs, they like that is like there will be a big fight with TradFi, if it comes to that. So they are not like natural enemies, and to I'm curious like to what extent like actually like the crypto and DeFi and stuff can actually like align with some of the traditional financial institutions in some ways to do stuff on the back end, because that just seems like, I don't know, that seems like a bigger threat to their business model than crypto and decentralized finance. So I think they're kind of being short-sighted as well, their lobby.
Guys, I'm loving the discussion. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I'm loving the discussion. We're going far and wide. We're a bit philosophical. We're talking regulation, CBDCs, foreign policy. We are coming up on the top of the hour. Want to be mindful of everyone's time. Before we close it out, and at the end, we'll give everyone, all the speakers, a chance to direct everyone of the listeners to their work, recent initiatives, projects, etc. But before we do that, I want to do a little small experiment. Let's see if the speakers today can do what Gary Gensler cannot. And I want to ask a simple question and a yes or no answer from each speaker. Do you think Gary Gensler will stay on or not? Will he be removed?
Yeah, sure, he stays on.
Yeah, I agree. He stays on.
Yes.
Wow. By anonymous vote, he stays on. Very, very sad to hear. It's a bit of a. I guess none of you were happy to give that answer, but it's your honest take.
Reality.
It's better. Sorry?
This is the reality, unfortunately.
Exactly. I think it's better to be prepared than to be hopeful and naive.
Yep.
Better to be
His term ends in 2026. So I think we're stuck with him till then. And yeah, I think there's a lot hinging on the next election, but I'm not very optimistic about that either. But the more politically informed people I've talked to are more optimistic about like the Senate race, in which case if the Republicans win the Senate, it will be harder for them to reappoint him after his term's up.
But that's you have to give credit to Republicans because the Democrats have been, for most part, aligned with his narrative. It's quite disturbing to see that. So we have to give a lot of credit to the Republicans because they are almost unanimously cracking down on what he has to say and his lack of ability to give some clarity on the space.
Yeah, definitely. The Democrats have taken a stance here. Want to thank the audience for being here, listening in, being part of this. I want to thank our speakers. Some great insights from different various backgrounds and therefore perspectives, which made it a very interesting mix, let's say. Please, guys, before we close it out, let people know where they can find your work, maybe newsletters, follow you, websites, etc.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I can start. So basically, we are off-chain London. You can ask me about the link for our Telegram community. I'm also involved in off-chain global. We are in 70 countries, so we all over the world. And also I'm involved with Credify Finance, which is like a DeFi lending protocol, but it's like pretty amazing. Obviously, everyone likes to say in crypto, this is like changing the world, obviously. Well, basically, what's our advantage? What we are real world asset backed. So the DeFi lending is basically it's actually traditional TradeFi. So we just transfer out the money into the traditional world, and it's happening the normal collateralized fiat backed way. So it's basically like bridge the gap between the TradeFi and DeFi. So it's kind of very smart. This new narrative RWA is like quite smart. But anyway, so I'm doing this as well and helping them, and also we are doing I'm helping advising like a Arbitrum stealth DEX launchpad, which is coming up. And Arbitrum will be probably pretty big, it's very much hyped. So anyway, that's all me at the moment, and tons of other projects.
Adriano, Maxi.
Yeah, nothing special here.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just follow me on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. I am writing a book about Ethereum, but more broadly about the metaverse. So don't know when that's going to be out, but if you follow me on Twitter, I'm very active here.
Yeah, same. Yep.
Guys, thanks once again to everyone in the audience. Please give these guys a follow. It's been wonderful having you. It's been an interesting conversation, and I hope we meet again. Thanks a lot, sirs. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you
You too.
for having us.
Thank you. Bye bye.